They were promised shelter, a place to pray, to heal, to forget the outside world. They walked through its doors and were never seen again. In the hills of East Kentucky, sealed beneath the stones of St. Berinth's Abbey, were 312 skeletons. The church never claimed them. The state never investigated them. And the nuns who ran the abbey had no graves of their own. Some say it was mercy, others penance. But one thing is certain, not a single record of those lives remains. The trees come first, tall, old, draped in fog. Their branches don't move in the wind, because here, in this hollow of the Appalachian Mountains, the wind never quite arrives. Only stillness. A narrow path curls upward along a ravine. At the end, overgrown in thorn brush and thick green moss, stands a building older than memory, built entirely of limestone, blackened by time and rot.St. Berinth's Abbey. There's no sign, number, markers. The crucifix above the entryway has eroded into a shapeless smear of rusted iron. They say it was founded in 1871, but no one can confirm who authorized it. Kentucky state records list its existence beginning in 1876, under a vague religious exemption, clause tied to foreign ecclesiastical interests. The diocese listed is Italian, but no archbishop in Rome has ever claimed it. The land it sits on nearly 400 acres was donated by a coal syndicate that vanished 5 years later in a series of financial fires. The contracts are in Latin. The ink, even now, refuses to fade.St. Berinth's was built to house those no one wanted, the sick, the poor, and the ones called unclean. No one knows what the church meant by that, but in every document, the word is written with a capital U. The earliest photographs of the abbey show its stone courtyard, empty, a dry fountain, a bell tower, and a chapel door with no knob, just a pull cord dot. There were no parishioners, no open masses, no burials, only silence, and a single blurred figure on the upper balcony, standing motionless behind an iron. Grill. Visitors to the mountain remember hearing the bell at odd hours, 2:17, M540 M. Never noon, never sunset. Some thought it was a timing error, but the bells were always deliberate. One slow ring, followed by 3 sharp ones. Then nothing. In 1882, a young priest named Father Malcolm Gwynn was assigned to inspect the grounds. He traveled from Charleston by train, then rode horseback through 4 miles of woodland trail. He never made it back, but his field notes, mailed in advance. Survived. He described the abbey as unspeakably clean, like a mausoleum that had never known the dead. He wrote of the entrance hall, tall ceilings, cold marble, and rows of locked cabinets marked only with dates. None newer than 1863. The nuns who received him wore black gloves and face veils, did not speak. Instead, they gestured, bowed slightly, and pointed him toward a side corridor lined with iron sconces. The flames burned white. He thought it was a chemical additive, perhaps magnesium, but the heat was strangely cold. He stayed. One night, slept in a cell beside the chapel. In the margin of his final page, he wrote, "I heard it under the floor. It was praying." No search was conducted. The diocese declared Father Gwynn unstable. His records were sealed, but something wasn't. Right. In the winter of 1890, a letter arrived at the Manchester post office, postmarked from the abbey. It was unsigned. Written in charcoal on coarse linen. It read, "We need a physician, one who will not report, one who has seen the face of rot." The town doctor, Silas McGreevy, was offered $300 in gold to visit for 3 days. He accepted. He was never seen again. In his clinic ledger, dated 1 day before departure, he wrote 3 names under the notes column: Margaret, Judith, and Anna. Each name was followed by a symbol, a triangle missing its base. The sheriff rode up the mountain 2 days later. He found no trace of McGreevy. The nuns denied he had ever arrived. They offered tea and sang hymns. He left. In his later years, that same sheriff. Robert Tillman told his grandson a story before he died, that when he reached the top of the trail, when the abbey first came into view, he saw someone watching him from the bell tower, a child, pale, hairless, smiling. In 1904, St. Berinth was officially reclassified as a private spiritual retreat. It was removed from state oversight. Census records stopped including it. By then, no mail came out. No visitors went in. But once a year, always in May, a black carriage would arrive, pulled by horses wrapped in white cloth, and something would be unloaded in the night, wrapped in linen, carried by two women in dark gloves. There were no funerals. No grave markers, just a growing scent in the trees. And the realization, by 1910, that no one ever left. The habit was black, the gloves were black, and the veil always fell below the chin. There are no photographs of their faces. The Sisters of St. Berinth, they arrived quietly, never in groups, and never during daylight. One by one, over the course of 19 years, they entered the abbey and did not leave. Local logbooks show no employment records, no immigration stamps, no surnames, only initials. Only Sister M, Sister A, Sister L, and always, beside each name, a mark shaped like an empty eye. Their order was never recognized by the Vatican, but they operated under an obscure 18th century rule, known only in fragments. The Regula Obscura. 3 vows were known: poverty, chastity, obedience. But the Sisters of St. Berinth swore a fourth: to speak no evil, nor name it. They didn't speak at all. Visitors to the abbey, the few who returned. Described it as a place of constant quiet, not peaceful. Stifled. One woman, a linen vendor who delivered bolts of cloth to the gatehouse in 1908, described the silence as inside the bones. She said the sisters moved in complete coordination, never glancing sideways, never gesturing unless necessary. They would take the fabric, bow slightly, and disappear behind the inner gate. Always in pairs, always with the same smell trailing behind them. Not perfume, not incense, something older, something dry, like burnt herbs and clay. That vendor would later report seeing a child's shoe caught in the iron bars, one that hadn't been there the week before. But something wasn't right. Locals from nearby mining towns, mostly Clay County men working night shifts, began reporting strange sightings along the tree line. Thin lines of figures moving in single file, lanterns with no flames, and, most disturbingly, cloth bundles carried between two sisters, wrapped tightly, cradled low. Always the same size. Too small to be adult, too still to be alive. The first report came from a man named Elijah Brooks in 1911. He said he was walking home along a service trail that cuts just west of the abbey wall. It was near too. Fog thick as ash. He heard movement in the trees, stopped, hid behind a rock. What he saw made him bite through the end of his cigar. A procession of nuns. 7, maybe 8, all silent, all gliding. One held a censer. Though no smoke came out, 2 more held the linen shape between them. It drooped slightly, as if wet, and trailing behind. A 9th figure. Head uncovered, face pale, eyes shut. A girl, barefoot. Following without resistance. He ran. He never walked that trail again. Another account. This one from 1914 came from a widow named Clara Sedge. She lived on the ridge across from the abbey and claimed she could see the chapel bell tower from her attic. She kept a notebook of every unusual thing she observed. October 3rd, lights in the woods. Saw 4 shapes, heard humming. Child's voice, very slow. December 22nd, a figure in white tried the gate. Didn't knock, just pressed her forehead to the bars. Stayed like that for over an hour. March 9th, the sisters do not blink. Watched through telescope. They just look and wait. When Clara's home was raided in 1921 during a tax seizure, her notebook was confiscated. The sheriff described it as disturbing and nonsensical. Religious ramblings mixed with obsessive sketches. But one image stood out, a rough charcoal drawing of 12 nuns in a circle dot in the center dot dot. A child suspended upside down. The words beneath read, "They don't bury them. They take them apart." Still, no action was taken, because no laws had been broken, and no one could prove the children existed. The only formal complaint came in 1917, when a traveling chaplain from Owensboro claimed to hear whispering inside the chapel. Even though none of the sisters were moving their mouths, he said the whispers were in Latin, but the words were backwards dot, repeated dot over and over, nomen ia syllabiter. His name shall be silenced. He was transferred 2 weeks later, never served again dot in 1920. Coal production spiked in the region. Mines expanded, so did the roadways dot, and with more access came more witnesses dot. One truck driver delivering timber near the lower woodline reported seeing a nun crouched beside a creek bed dot alone, that she was washing something dot, not clothing, something soft. He said it looked like hair, children's hair dot. Another man, Daniel Moss, was hired to dig a trench near the Abbey's southern slope. He struck something beneath the soil, not rock, crate. Inside, dozens of wax-sealed envelopes, each one with a year written on it dot. Each envelope held a lock of hair dot and a name, none repeated. He turned them in to the Clay County office. A box was logged dot and lost. When Daniel tried to follow up a month later, he was told the case had been absorbed by the diocese. But the diocese had no record of the box dot, no record of Daniel dot, and no record of VLA sisters. That was the pattern. Something unearthed dot, then silence dot. It was only in the late 1930s, during the height of the Depression, that people stopped reporting sightings. The roads collapsed, rail lines were redirected dot, and the Abbey vanished from the public eye. But those who grew up in the hills still remembered. One elderly miner, interviewed in 1983, described the sisters as living shadows. He said they made no sound, but when they walked by, the birds stopped singing, and the air smelled like wax. He only said one more thing before his interview ended. They weren't praying, they were waiting. The frost clings to the window panes, thick as skin, and beyond the glass, only trees. Still, close, watching dot inside. The walls are stone, the floors ash wood darkened with time. No toys, no chalk, no names dot. Between 1892 and 1910, 154 children entered St. Berinth's Abbey. There is no list, no registry, no official notice of intake or release. Only the faint, repetitive handwriting of a sister's logbook, found decades later. Each entry, no more than a date and a word. Cleansing. They came from the coal towns, from orphan lines, from mothers who had nothing. One by one, they were handed over in exchange for absolution, food, or silence. But something wasn't right. A woman named Edith Keene brought her niece to the Abbey in August of 1894. Her brother had died in a mining collapse. The girl, 8 years old, had stopped speaking dot. She was healthy, docile, and Edith had heard the nuns were kind. She was met at the gate by 2 sisters. Neither spoke. They simply opened the door, nodded, and took the girl inside. Edith returned 3 months later. No answer. She waited outside for 6 hours dot. Then a different sister emerged. She did not know the girl's name. She claimed no such child had been received. Edith was told to leave and warned not to return without a priest. She filed a petition with the Clay County magistrate. It was denied. There were no records dot, and then came the screams dot. In the winter of 1896, hunters in the hills began reporting strange sounds coming from the western tree line, short, repeating dot, not animals, not adults dot, children dot. One man dot, Robert Elkins, claimed to hear it every time the moon disappeared. A high, short shriek, then silence. Then again. He said it was always in threes, and always came from the direction of the Abbey's lower chapel. He followed once, Half a mile through brush, the trees so dense he could barely see, but he stopped when he saw light, not firelight, pale, blue, flickering behind the Abbey's far wall. He swore it was coming from beneath the ground. He never returned to that side. Of the mountain, there were more like him, and then, in 1901, a digger came forward, Thomas Prentice, graveyard custodian at St. Gildes, 15 miles east. He was a recluse, worked at night, known for digging faster than any man in the county. Came to the sheriff in March, quiet, pale, eyes sunken. He claimed he had been paid in coin, gold, unmarked, to dig 3 graves behind the Abbey's outer orchard, all shallow, all unmarked, each one exactly 4 feet long. He asked no questions, but he watched. He said the sisters carried 3 small bundles, each wrapped in thick linen, stained dark in the center. He was told not to speak, not to look inside. He didn't, but he heard something. He said as the first bundle was lowered, it let out a breath. Just one, then went still. He stayed awake for 3 nights, then came forward. His account was written down and discarded. No grave markers were ever found. By 1905, the children's arrival had slowed. Those who came were older, thin, sick. Some were brought directly from hospitals, others from asylums, but none left. One nurse, Mary Fell, claimed she had seen a girl from her own ward taken to the Abbey. The child had been treated for malnutrition. She was expected to recover, but a week after her departure, the hospital received a sealed envelope. Inside, a lock of hair, and a page from the Bible, Psalm 51. Purge me with hyssop, and I shall be clean. No return address. No explanation. Mary tried to reach the Abbey by mail. Her letters were never answered. A year later, she quit the hospital. She was later found in her home, surrounded by pages torn from the Book of Psalms. Her mouth was sewn shut with black thread. The police called it a delusion, but something had taken root. In 1909, an anonymous report was filed to the Eastern Kentucky Medical Board. It claimed to be from a former sister, one who had fled, one who had cut her tongue and buried it at the base of the cross. She wrote that the children were never taught, never baptized, never named. Only isolated. And washed. Again and again. The cleansing was not metaphor. They were stripped, submerged, scrubbed with salt and stone until their skin bled. Some lived. Most did not. She said there was a room beneath the chapel. No light, no sound. Just stone troughs and a drain that led into the earth. She did not sign the letter, but the handwriting matched the old logbook. Sister M. That same year, a heavy storm caused part of the orchard wall to collapse. Locals who investigated said the ground beneath was soft, rotten. They found nothing but the scent. It lingered, and the trees never grew back. Today, no records remain of the children, of the rites, of the trough. Only an empty patch of soil, a trough-shaped stain in the chapel floor. And a question no one can answer. Where did they go? And why? Did no one speak their names? The rain didn't stop for 7 days. Sheets of water poured from the ridge like the sky itself had cracked open. And on the 8th day, when the clouds pulled back like torn cloth, the land had changed. Spring 1912. The creek running beside St. Berinth's Abbey had risen 6 feet overnight. Its banks collapsed. Earth turned soft. Trees leaned inward. The northern wall of the chapel had cracked down the center. But what drew the most attention was the floor. Beneath the main altar, the flagstones had shifted, slid, revealed something beneath. A door, thick, oak, rotted at the corners, with hinges on the inside. The local parish was the first to respond. Townspeople from Manchester and smaller nearby settlements gathered to offer help. They brought carts, sandbags, rope, but when they reached the gate, they were stopped. 2 sisters stood there, still, arms crossed. No words, no signs. Just the sound of rain dripping from the eaves. A priest, Father Eli Moran, insisted on entering. Sighed he had served with the sisters during a charity mission. Years earlier, he was allowed in alone. The others waited outside. 1 hour passed, then 2. When he emerged, his face was gray. His collar soaked through with sweat. He didn't speak, vomited in the grass. Then walked into the woods and didn't return for days. Later, In private letters to a fellow clergyman, he would write, "I smelled rot and frankincense." At the same time, as if the holiest thing had been made out of the worst parts of the body. He said he descended 12 steps, stone, narrow, each one etched with words, but none in Latin, none he could understand. He said the air got colder as he went, not with wind, not with depth, but with something else. I could feel it moving along the inside of my chest. He did not reach the bottom. A sister stopped him. She touched his forehead and whispered. He said he didn't remember walking back up. He only remembered closing his eyes. And seeing them, the ones they kept. But something wasn't right. By the third day, church officials arrived, not from the local diocese, from Charleston. 2 priests, 1 lay brother, 1 man who wore no collar at all. They examined the damaged chapel, took photographs, measured the opening with calipers and chalk. Then they ordered the door sealed. Not boarded. Sealed. They hired a blacksmith. From Hazard to forge iron rivets. He was instructed to affix 4 plates across the stone, each bolt to be hammered flush. The man, Will Harper, had done work for churches before, but he told his wife that this was different. He said they were sealing something in, not out. He said the smell followed him home. He burned his clothes, refused to work for clergy ever again. The church issued a formal statement to prevent mold and structural weakness due to flooding. The sub-basement of the St. Berinth Chapel has been permanently closed, but no one had known there was a sub-basement. No original floor plans included it. No. Local contractors recalled building one. The stone was older than the chapel itself, uneven, hand-hewn. Some claimed it matched the type used in early native burial mounds. Others said it came from the river. The silence deepened. After the door was sealed, the sisters no longer emerged from the chapel. Mass was no longer held, though the bell continued to ring, but only at night. Always in 3s, then 1. Long pause, then once more. A hunter, passing near the grounds at dusk, claimed to hear a sound rising from the stones. Not voices. Breathing. He said it came in waves, inhaled, held, then gone. He never returned to that part of the mountain. Father Moran eventually left the priesthood, moved to New York, became a hospital. Orderly. In a private journal found after his death, he wrote only 1 entry under the heading Berinth. A breath of the saved and the damned is the same. It's the ones between that wait forever. Local superstition began to build. Children dared each other to climb the slope, and folk touched the chapel wall. Some returned crying, others silent. 1 boy was found sleepwalking weeks later. He had carved a circle into his chest with the end of a nail. When asked why, he whispered, "They told me I had to match." And when asked who told him, he simply looked at the trees. By autumn, the path to the abbey was overgrown. No new sisters arrived. No mail came or went. But sometimes, at dusk, pale smoke could be seen curling from the chimney above the chapel. Not thick. Thin, almost clear. And the smell was never the same. Sometimes like old flowers, sometimes like skin, but always with something beneath it, something like salt. Today, that door remains sealed. The iron rusted now, the stone cracked around the edges, but the plates are still warm to the touch, even in snow. Even at night. And though the parish has long since closed, the bell still rings, but no one knows who pulls the cord. The stone was thinner here, behind the confessional wall, rotted wood peeled back like old bark, and behind it, something tucked deep between brick and bone-dry mortar. A book, rough leather, no title, no cross, no clasp. Only a single stitched thread holding the cover shut, black and tied tight. It was found in 1946 during renovation work ordered by the diocese. The northern confessional had begun to sag, its corner warped, the inner wood soft. A priest from Georgia had been sent to assess the damage. But what he found was not rot. It was history. The journal was handwritten, dozens of pages, carefully inked in a rigid hand, tight, unadorned. The first page bore only one name, Sister Magdalene. No surname, no date, only a mark beside the name. A simple triangle with no base. The same mark found on old letters. And locks of hair. The diary began in fragments, reflections, prayers, snatches of Latin. Then, confessions. She wrote of a room, not listed on the Abbey's plans, not known to any outsider, ad carnem minuendum, to wither the flesh. She called it the withering room. She said it had no windows. The walls were wet with condensation, even in winter. The floor was stone, cold, sloped slightly toward a drain. Chains were embedded in the ground, 4 lengths, worn smooth. The door had no handle on the inside, and that's where they brought the girls, those whose sins clung to the skin. Sister Magdalene described the process in careful, structured terms. She believed it was holy. A rite. First, fasting. Then silence. Then immersion in salt water until the tongue numbed. And the recitations. Psalm fragments, apostolic verses, but spoken backward. She wrote, in reverse, the words scrape away what the soul clings to. In reverse, we unbuild the self. Girls were kept in the withering room for 3 days, sometimes longer. They were not permitted to sleep. Every 2 hours, a bell would ring. A sister would enter, recite from memory the 7 stages of transgression. Then return to silence. And close the door. Magdalene described the voices, not of the sisters. Of the girls, their words blurred, slurred, the Latin dissolving into dry syllables and low groans. She said the tongues would bleed first, and the lips would crack, and the skin. She called it the peeling. It wasn't a metaphor. She wrote of skin curling away from fingertips, of hair sloughing off in damp clumps. The soul is cleansed through the failure of the body. But something wasn't right. Halfway through the diary, the tone changed. The entries became erratic. One page was covered entirely in tally marks. Another, just a single line. She would not stop smiling. Sister Magdalene wrote that one girl, unnamed, remained lucid after 7 days. She had stopped speaking, but her eyes never closed. She sat upright, never cried, only mouthed a single word, again and again, backward. No one remembered who she was. No records existed, but she was seen again, in the chapel, in the very back pew, head down, hands folded, as if she belonged, as if she never left. One sister tried to speak to her, reached out and recoiled. Her fingers blistered instantly. By nightfall, she was blind. The girl was gone. Magdalene wrote, the flesh had been withered, but the soul did not leave. After that, no girls were sent to the withering room. The chains were removed. The bell was buried. The door was sealed with mortar. No priest was informed. Only the sisters knew, and they took no vows to tell. Last entry in the diary is dated November 14th, 1917. It reads, I have laid myself down in the place of the unclean. I speak now only in reverse. He waits beneath the floor. Sister Magdalene was never recorded in any official registry. No burial, no transfer, no dismissal, but a robe matching the sister's uniform was found in the walls behind the confessional, stiff with time. Still damp. And beneath it, a small blackened crucifix, bent at the center. As if held too tightly for far too long. Today, the confessional has been rebuilt, the walls reinforced, but the space behind it has never stayed dry. And sometimes, when the chapel is empty, A voice is heard, not loud, at angry. Just a girl, whispering in Latin, backwards. The hills were quiet that year. Too quiet, locals said. Not just the wind or the birds, but something deeper, like the woods were holding their breath. The first was found in August of 1971. Eastern Kentucky was in the middle of a heat wave. Wild dogs had been spotted further down the slope near Indian Creek, and 2 boys had gone missing for a night. When searchers combed the hillside, they found a cave behind the tree line, hidden under hanging brush, almost invisible unless you already knew it was there. Inside was a woman, naked, emaciated. Her skin burned dark from sun exposure. The cave floor was red, covered in crude symbols, crosses, circles, lines that curved into thorns. She'd painted them all with her fingers and with her own blood. She didn't speak, wouldn't let them touch her. She only held up one hand, trembling, and pointed to the dirt wall behind her. Etched there, with what looked like a rock fragment, were 3 words: I was clean. They called her Jane Doe. She was taken to the county hospital and placed under observation. Days passed. She never ate, never moved. She just sat on the floor and hummed. Doctors described it as tuneless, circular, like a loop of something half remembered. When a nurse tried to offer her water, she finally reacted. She took the cup, held it against her lips, and poured it on the floor. She used her finger to write something in the puddle, a single cross, and then drew a line through it. She was transferred to a private facility 2 weeks later. Her file was marked nonverbal trauma patient, but tucked in the margins of her intake form, a note, possible history with Berinth. She died 6 months later, and when they moved her body, they found scratches beneath the bed, 13 tally marks, 1 for each night, 1 for each drop of blood. The second survivor came in 1978. This one, found walking along Route 421, barefoot and bleeding. She didn't cry, didn't flinch. She just walked. A farmer pulled over, thinking she was lost, but she didn't respond to his questions. She simply handed him a folded piece of paper. It was torn from a Bible. On one side, the Lord's Prayer. On the other, a map. Drawn by hand, crude but unmistakable. The outline of St. Berinth's Abbey, but not the abbey as it stood in photographs. This was older, deeper. 13 circles had been marked in red ink, each one labeled the same. Shame. The girl, listed only as Mary J. in hospital records, would never speak again, but she drew dozens of drawings. Rooms without doors, beds without pillows, chains, bells, a trough. Always in the same pail, charcoal. Always with the same phrase written in the margins. We went downward. She died in 1984, cause unknown. Her final drawing was found hidden inside the hospital's chapel. A single room, the walls made of mouths, the floor open. As if leading down into something else, but something wasn't right. The third was found in 1991, not by accident. Her name was June Halpern. A psychiatric patient who had begun speaking in what staff believed was religious glossolalia. But one orderly recognized something in her cadence, not divine, not random. Structured. Latin. Backwards. She was placed under supervised hypnosis. What they recorded would later be sealed. June spoke calmly at first, eyes closed, pulse steady. Then she whispered something, not a memory, not a phrase, just 4 words. The thorns don't bleed. Her mouth began to bleed. She started to choke, then scream, and then silence. Her heart stopped mid-sentence. She was 4'2". Never married. Her background was traced, in part, to a Catholic girls' refuge in Kentucky. Now closed. No records. Just an unsigned letter on official church letterhead. It read, June was never one of ours. She was already marked. All 3 women were found over a span of 20 years, all within 60 miles of the Abbey. All silent. No family. No clear medical history. only fragments, marks, drawings, and one phrase, repeated in different ways, backwards or forwards, spoken or written. The thorns don't bleed, but the question remained, who told them that? And why did none survive long enough to explain what it meant? Because if the thorns don't bleed, then maybe something else does. Something still alive, waiting. Beneath the floor. The grass grew high around the foundation, soft, almost untouched, as if nothing had ever disturbed it. But underneath. There was rot and waiting. In early summer of 2003, the Appalachian Preservation Society received a state grant to begin restoration work on St. Berinth's Abbey. They had no plans to reopen the Abbey as a place of faith, just a museum, a monument to rural Catholic history. The team was small, 6 researchers, 2 part-time laborers, 1 structural engineer. They brought cameras, hard hats, flashlights. And shovels. The first day was quiet. Measurements, exterior surveys. Weathered stone columns were sketched and logged. A single crack near the chapel's eastern foundation caught their attention. Nothing unusual. Age, water stress. But the engineer. A woman named Camille Dawson said something didn't add up. The wall was too thick, more than load bearing. She tapped it. The sound echoed. Hollow. There was something behind it. They weren't supposed to break stone, but she made the call. The next morning, just after 9 a.m., 2 workers began to chip away at the weakened joint. 40-5 minutes in, one of them. Jacob Moore. Struck metal. Pipe, not wiring. An iron clasp bolted into the wall's interior. He said it reminded him of a door handle. And then. The stone gave way. The wall crumbled inward, revealing a pocket of darkness that stretched down at a slight angle. The air changed instantly. Damp, heavy. And thick with something else. The smell of burned cloth. And something beneath it. Sweet, sour, charred. Jacob gagged. Camille took 1 step forward, flashlight in hand. Her beam cut through dust and found nothing. Just a wide, rough-hewn chamber. And then, the bones, piled against the far wall, stacked, shoulder-high. Hundreds. At first, they thought it might have been storage for animal remains. A refuse pit. But as Camille moved closer, the light revealed details that couldn't be mistaken. Skulls. Small, delicate. With cracked crowns and open jaws. Some still partially fused, some clearly infantile. Others fully grown. The team stopped work immediately. They contacted the county, then the state. Forensics arrived 3 days later. No one had touched the pile, but something wasn't right. The bones weren't aged. They were brittle, but not ancient. Carbon testing placed every remain within the past 80 years. No trace of soil embedding. No signs of long-term burial. They had not been placed gently. They had been discarded and burned. Ash was found along the edges of the chamber. Thick, oily residue coated the underside of many skulls. Some had teeth still intact. Others did not. The number shocked investigators. 312 individual remains. At minimum. Stacked without ceremony, without markers, without blessings. Just bones. Mass. Tossed. Some were missing hands. Others, parts of the jaw. Several had nails embedded in the sides of their skulls. All had suffered trauma. Not from collapse, but impact. Repeated. Intentional. One investigator, Dr. Howard Kleiner, recorded a personal note in his case log. It was not a burial. It was a discard. I do not believe the ones who did this thought they were hiding anything. I believe they thought they were finishing something. Behind the chamber, a second opening was discovered. Smaller, narrow, almost a crawl space. Inside. Only one object, a broken crucifix, carved from bone. It had no head. Instead, at the top of the crossbeam, a small circle had been etched. Inside it. 13 lines, radiating outward. No known Christian Order claimed the symbol. None could explain its use. Camille had seen it once before. In a drawing. Found in a patient's journal. Girl, silent, one of the survivors. She had labeled it shame. The county ordered the chamber sealed, but news had already spread. A preservationist leaked photos to a local paper. Within days, the site was swarmed. Reporters, protesters, amateur ghost hunters. The church remained silent. When asked to comment, a spokesperson for the diocese said only, "The matter is under review. We ask for privacy and prayer." But the prayers didn't help. Camille left the project. Said she hadn't slept since entering the pit. Said she saw things in her dreams. Children with no mouths. Ropes instead of arms. And something behind them. Just out of sight. Breathing. Jacob never returned to work. He moved to Indiana. His wife later said he would wake up at night screaming about the ones still moving. He was never able to describe what that meant. Only that he heard it, even now. From behind the walls. The chamber remains, buried, but the memory does not. The bones were collected. Cataloged. Stored in a state facility in Frankfurt, but not buried, and not named. Their death certificates list cause as undetermined, but everyone on the team knew they didn't die in accidents, or famine, or war. They died here. Together. In one place. And no one stopped it. Not the sisters, not the church. Not God. Just stone. And silence. And heat that never fades. Even now. A fog had settled low. That morning, unmoving, like a breath held too long. By then, the story had already broken. Local stations ran segments on the pit of skulls. A few even used the word massacre, but the church stayed quiet. Until it did and single quotes T. 2 weeks after the discovery, a press release was issued, typed, single page, no seal. It read, "The remains appear consistent with early plague victims, likely 19th century. Burial practices of the time were often inconsistent with modern expectations. No mention of burning, or chains, or the fact that some of the bones had fingernail scratches deep in the marrow. And no mention of the box. But there was a photograph, taken by a volunteer, never published, never meant to be, snapped on a disposable camera, left behind in a zipped vest pocket. It showed the chapel. And behind it. 3 men. 2 in dark suits, and 1 in crimson robes. A bishop, identified later as Bishop Armand Coyle, Diocese of Louisville. He was carrying something, small, heavy. A box. Roughly the size of a tabernacle vessel. Square, lead-lined, painted red. No markings, no label, no cross. Just a metal clasp across the front. Bolted shut. He was not part of the excavation team. He had not been invited, and no one saw him leave. Church made no statement. When questioned, a spokesperson said only, "No such item is listed in our property register. Any assumptions are speculative and unhelpful." But someone had seen it before. In a journal, Sister Magdalene's diary, discovered behind the confessional in 1946, page 38. She wrote, "It was sealed with red, lined in lead, the vessel of her silence. We were told to never look upon it, only to carry it. When the screaming would not stop, the phrasing was strange, past tense, but urgent. The her remained unnamed, but in later pages, the journal repeated the phrase 5 more times, each in reference to an event. Always the same. The vessel was moved below. The room stayed quiet for 3 nights after. She required it near the mouth of the shame. No sister would open it. Not even Magdalene. Not even her. And finally. It was placed in the red cloth and carried to the pit. That is where her silence must remain. That is where the thorns bleed. But something wasn't right. The box was never recovered. Not by law enforcement. Not by the Preservation Society. Not by the state. Only the bishop was seen with it, and no one has seen him since. 2 years after the photograph surfaced, Bishop Armand Coyle was listed as retired due to illness. His parishioners say he left suddenly. No farewell. No mass. Just gone. His home in Oldham County was sold. Contents removed. No forwarding address, but one item was noted in the estate listing. A storage trunk. Dated 1939. Red lacquer. Lead lining. Missing its clasp. Inside. Nothing except a scrap of fabric. Monastic. Red. And a single page from a hymnal. Blank. Except for 3 words written in a child's hand. She is beneath. Investigators tried to follow the trail. To find the bishop. To find the box. But every attempt ended in silence. No clergy responded to inquiries. No records were released. One archivist, anonymously, sent a letter to the preservation team. It read, "There is no vessel. There is no shame. There is no Magdalene. The abbey was not a place. It was a mouth. You do not open a mouth once it has eaten." The letter was unsigned, but bore a single symbol at the bottom, a circle, with 13 lines radiating out. No one on the team returned to the site. Camille Dawson, the structural engineer, left Kentucky altogether. She refused interviews, refused contact, but a voicemail was recovered from her old phone, dated 4 days after the bishop was photographed. A message left for her sister. "I think the box was hers, not Magdalene's. Hers, the one they never named, the one they tried to bury in silence. But silence moves, and it carries things with it. There is no official explanation. No forensic chain of custody. No church inventory. But every person who handled the remains. Who stepped into the pit, even once, reported the same thing. A sound, low, at first, then higher. Not singing. Not language, just a pulse, and something just beneath it, like cloth tearing or breath reversing. The abbey was never converted into a museum. Funding was withdrawn. The site was reclassified as unsuitable for structural rehabilitation. The entrance is now chained shut, but the earth hasn't settled. And sometimes, at night, the chains move. Not loudly. Not all at once. Just enough to make a sound. Metal on stone. As if something below is stirring and waiting to be carried again. The wind moves slower here, as if it too is afraid to disturb the ground. St. Berinth's Abbey still stands, half swallowed by ivy, wrapped in wire. Its windows shattered in patterns that look almost deliberate. As if something wanted in, or something wanted out. Civil Ordinance 227C was passed in 2005, declaring the site a restricted zone. No trespassing, no tours, no religious gatherings. The foundation was ruled structurally unsound, but those who've seen it say otherwise. They say the walls still hold, that the stone doesn't crack no matter the freeze, that ivy dies when it touches the southern spire. And that every year, just once, the building breathes. All Souls Day, November 2nd, the veil between this world and the next. Locals don't go near the abbey that day. Not anymore, but they see it. From the ridge, from the back roads, from the turnoff near the old mining trail. Candlelight, flickering, behind the broken chapel window. Always the same window, always just one flame, but it moves. Not like fire should. It stays low, near the floor. And then rises slowly. Pausing. As if listening. As if watching. They say it starts at 9 p.m., always at the same time. No footsteps, no wind, just the light, and something else. Low. Almost like voices. A sound that doesn't echo, even in the valley. A sound you don't hear with your ears, only after. In the chest, in the jaw, in your sleep. The sheriff's office received 5 calls in 2011, all from different residents. All reporting the same thing. A child's voice, repeating the same phrase. We're still waiting. The calls were dismissed. A prank, a mass suggestion. But one deputy. Still on record. Wrote this in his incident log. Caller number 3 was whispering. Said she was hiding in the bathtub. Said it wasn't a voice. It was a feeling, like something breathing into her mouth. When I asked what she meant, she said, "They're inside the walls now." He didn't follow up. None of them did. The Abbey has not been entered since 2004. The chains remain on the front gate, rusting but intact. A preservation group requested access in 2018. They were denied, but when they sent a drone over the chapel roof, the feed cut out mid-flight. Before it did. The operator described what he saw: a darkened altar, a line of something along the floor, too straight for dust, too narrow for rope, like a wound or a mouth. It extended from the front doors to the rear wall. And stopped beneath the broken window. That same window, the one where the light appears. A historian from the University of Kentucky once attempted a sound mapping of the region. Using sensitive parabolic microphones. She recorded at 3 points around the Abbey. At each site, the reading was consistent. Below the normal threshold. 2. Quiet. 2 still. But when she amplified the lowest register, she heard something. Breath. Not human. Not rhythmic. But constant and layered. As if a dozen voices were whispering at once. From beneath. She ended the study. The data was never published, but she told a colleague in a recorded phone call. The walls are still holding, but it's not to keep people out. It's to keep sound in. And then she paused. And said something else. It knows the calendar. It waits for the date. That's the worst part, because it does wait. Not for light, not for warmth, but for attention. The kind that forgets to look away. And once a year, someone always does. In 2022, a boy went missing from his home in Harlan County. His family said he had nightmares leading up to Halloween. Said he kept whispering in his sleep, "There's a girl in the wall." He was last seen riding his bike near the old postal route. Half a mile from the Abbey. The bike was found, propped against the gate. The chains were undisturbed. There were no prints, no signs of forced entry, but carved into the base of the gate, in the paint, not the metal. Was a word, scrawled in childish letters, over and over. Shame. It was scrubbed away, but the paint never quite faded. Even now, you can still see it. If you know where to look. The Abbey no longer shows up on GPS. The roads leading there have been left to weather. No one talks about it. Not out loud. But they know. They remember. And some still claim to hear it. Not every night. Just when it rains. When the water hits the stone in a certain way, the sound slips out. A voice, not more than a breath, saying, "We're still waiting." And the walls don't echo. They listen, and they remember, and they never forget the ones who listened back, even once. Faith can guide, but it can also silence. What began as sanctuary became suffocation. No institution is too holy to be questioned, no history too buried to be unearthed. And if 312 voices still echo beneath the stone, what else waits in the silence of forgotten sanctuaries?